This is Bryce on BYU. All right, guys, welcome back to Bryce on BYU. It's been a year. I think the last episode I uploaded to the podcast over on Spotify, or here on Spotify, depending on if you're listening to this or watching it. The last podcast I uploaded was the Iowa State preview. I believe I went to that game, and so I was posting that and being like, hey, I'm gonna go to the game, and I even afterwards recorded a post-game breakdown, and if you remember, I need to look up what the score is because it's been so long, but BYU versus Iowa State 2023. Oh, whoops, I meant to put 2023. I was looking that up. We lost 45-13. And there was moment. I think there was a moment in the first quarter where it felt like, oh, maybe we can keep this close, and then it just we lost it. So, was not a good game for us. The most I think we got when we got to within 31-13. I remember thinking, oh well, maybe we could do something to make a game out of it. Isaac Rex had caught this pass from Parker Kingston, and it was a whole thing. And you just wondered what could happen, but we lost, and that was last year. And last year's behind us. And I will say this: coming into this year, I was very. I didn't give this team a lot of credit. If you look on my Twitter, I think I posted. Or X or whatever you call it. I posted that I thought maybe at best we might be 7-5, 8-4 maybe was I think my ceiling. And while all those technically are still possible, I think I underestimated this BYU team because I think I honestly was just hoping we'd get to 6-6, and as long as this team has the culture that I think they do this year, we're going to be a lot better than that. So the podcast is going to have a little bit of a different format going forward. I haven't 100% decided what the final format of this thing is going to be. It's still kind of a work in progress, but we're going to not necessarily go with the same thing we did last year, because last year it was we would talk about the BYU game. We'd talk about the we would talk about the game coming up. We would talk about, and we'd have a preview episode and a post game episode. And that will remain the same. But as for how we will do things going forward, I'm not 100% sure. In terms of breaking down each episode, I would have before I had well, here's some things to look out for, keys to the game. Here's what you might see from, today from Arizona. And I'll talk about a lot of that stuff in general, but I haven't decided how I want to break it down. I don't want to keep myself to too rigid of a structure. So basically today what we'll be doing is we'll be going over the Arizona game, and then we'll be going over the, I think at the end I'll give my prediction, and we'll just go from there. And like I said, we'll just kind of let this be a fluid thing. I just wanted to kind of get the ball rolling on having the podcast back up and back out there again. So, so this is being posted today, which should be Friday, unless something went wrong. And, so welcome in. This is Bryce on BYU. And, I did a couple things to change up the look. We're gonna go from here, and hopefully you guys are enjoying it. I've got a couple more followers on Twitter. Hi to anybody who might be listening or watching that has heard me around or has read any of my posts on Twitter. I try to keep things realistic, but I also try to be a fan, because that's what I am. And so this week is Arizona. So let's kind of break down what's come up so far this season. BYU is 5-0. I did not think I was sure, because of, like I said, how pessimistic I became after last season. I was sure that we were going to be maybe 1-2 through the first three. I overestimated who Wyoming would be, and I mean that SMU game was close to me being like, oh well, yeah, this is where the wheels fall off, and but BYU has shown this year that they are a great defensive team. They as I've listened to some of the PFF guys talk, I think what they are right on the money with the fact that BYU doesn't play good defense because they're necessarily they necessarily have these guys who are amazing stars. I mean, I think Jack Kelly is awesome. I think Glasker's amazing. Tyler Batty, just to name a few. Crew Wakely with that interception. We've got Jacob Robinson. We've got some beasts out there, but nobody's necessarily like being like the game-changing person, because nobody has to in Jay Hill's defense, and that's what's gotten us to 5-0. And our offense, I think, is starting to come together now. I think a lot of people are gonna, there's still a few people that are left straggling on the Jake Retzloff train, but I think a lot of that just has to do with the way the rushing game has come together. We've had a lot of injuries, so a lot of the stuff hasn't been able to stick. And that's part of kind of what I was going to talk about today. But yeah, being 5-0 with a defense that's been awesome, and I think the offense is starting to show signs of consistency and signs of being able to put up good points on the board. And so yeah, let's talk about the BYU versus Arizona matchup. Big matchup. We got Fox Big Noon kickoff coming in. We've got the prime slot for BYU, which is I believe that's 2 p.m. Sorry, I'll let me just double check that really quick. 2 p.m. Lavelle Edwards Stadium. It's gonna be popping. I think a lot of fans going into the season were still all about that whole Vampire Cougs curse thing about like we can't play in the daytime. I think what we showed against Baylor in that first half shows that yes, we can still play in the daytime, or we can play in the daytime, and I think the BYU team will be ready to get out at 2:00. This is definitely not a day game in the sense of it being like a morning time sort of thing like we saw a couple times last season for BYU. And to be honest, I wasn't buying too much into that this year because BYU played well against Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Those were good games. They didn't win, but they played well. They played against very good Oklahoma team and were right there. So as for the day game, I don't buy into that. I love that we're in the prime slot. We've got Fox's number 1 team coming in. It's a great opportunity for the Cougars to prove themselves again. There's been people pointing out like, oh well, BYU kind of clams up. Look at how they did in TC versus TC in 2009. Again, I would just like to point out, I think in 2009 TCU just had more horses. They just had more guys that they had better depth. They just had just a better team overall that year, and that combined probably with BYU putting up a bit of a dud, and sometimes you just have that game. But I think Kalani's gonna have these guys ready. I think Kalani's got these guys focused on the right things, and it sounded like coming out of that bye week, like they just kept things rolling as usual. They weren't trying to kind of outplay themselves, kind of try to do something weird for the bye week and get out of the rhythm. I think he wanted to keep the rhythm going, and I really believe that the way that he and Jay Hill have this team going, it's awesome to watch how things are progressing forward for BYU. And so yeah, we got BYU playing Arizona. So kind of wanted to go over some of the stats. A lot of people have been, if you listen to some of the sports shows around here, that there's talk about how BYU has no rushers over 100 yards this season. I think a lot of the time though we kind of ignore the fact that Like on the season, nobody has 100 yards outside of Jake Retzloff, who has 156 yards. And I get that. We also, I think that ignores a couple things. One, you kind of ignore the fact that BYU has guys who've just been hurt. It's just been a kind of a rotation of multiple guys who have had to do a lot of different things to get that running game going. And so I think, we're going to see that BYU with a proper running back room. I think that's going to be big going into this game. I think it's going to be something worth talking about. Because right now, Arizona's defense has the guys that if BYU can't get the running game going, it's going to be a hard slog, probably a good defensive battle. But if BYU can, I think that opens up so much for Jake Retzloff. I mean, one of the things you look at is Sione Moa in that game versus Kansas State. He was great. He was wonderful. He was eye-opening. And for me, so if you saw the depth chart from BYU football or from earlier this week, it listed all of their running backs with an or. So you had LJ Martin or Sione Amo or Nick Nalahine or Hinckley Rapati or Miles Davis or Pokai Honga, all those guys. And I think they're trying to say, like, look, all these guys can do the job. And I think for me, what I would like to see is them leaning heavily on LJ Martin and Sione Moa. I think those guys are great. I think you can probably rely on LJ Martin. I think you ride whatever hand is hot, but I think you could probably rely on LJ Martin to be, maybe your number one guy and have Sione Moa be your change of pace. Or at the very least to, relieve him during a couple series here and there. And like I said, just go with whoever's hot and try to put up, 150 yards. If they could get 150 to 200 yards, it's going to be a good game for BYU. Because what you really need is Jake Retzloff to be able to go out there, to be able to do the play action. Because when Jake Retzloff gets into that play action, when he gets into that point where they are giving him space because the defense isn't necessarily just, going right in on the pass, and can't just put all the pressure in on him. It gives, when he has time, he can do some amazing things. And so I think you'll see some good runs from BYU. So yeah, it just all depends on how things go for BYU in the rushing game. I think I talked about this so much last year, but this year I feel like the rushing attack has been just a lot more smooth and solid. And so, we'll see how that goes, but I'm looking forward to seeing BYU just pushing forward, because I think if the O-line can get a good push, I know we're going to be, without Connor Pay, we're going to have a hard time necessarily setting up a lot of the same things. But I from interviews I've heard from both the radio and from the Locked On Cougars podcast, which is a great podcast. Again, I will recommend that almost every episode. If you want to hear some really good breakdown analysis and some really good, just some really good content interviews, he has it all. I would highly recommend you guys go over, and if you haven't, check out Locked On Cougars. Jake Hatch is great. He's, he gives good information. He helps prep you for the games in terms of what to expect. But yeah, I think BYU has a solid game plan, probably, coming in. It's gonna be a tough slog though, because BYU has to look out for Noah Fafita, who I think we all know is a great quarterback. This is a guy who wanted to go to Utah but ended up at Arizona, and then has shown them that was, something that they should have gone through with. Was Noah Fafita has been an awesome college quarterback. He does have some He has had some issues with some interceptions. His touchdown interception ratio is 7-6, so 7 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I just for context, BYU Jake Retzloff is 12-5. So I think sometimes if we think about Jake's ball care or whatever, it's night and day between the two quarterbacks. If BYU can make sure to keep Noah Fafita in the pocket, keep him kind of more in the center areas, it's when he's broken contain in the past that he's been able to push the ball downfield and get the ball to the best wide receiver in the nation. There's a lot of people that kind of tiptoe, well, maybe he's the best kind of thing. But McMillan is the best wide receiver in the nation. He's got 37 receptions for 664 yards. That is almost half of all of Fafita's passing yards. So one of the big keys to the game tomorrow is gonna be, can you stop McMillan? Can you slow that connection down between Fafita and McMillan? You're not going to be able to put one-on-one, and so it'll open some other stuff up for them. But I think BYU has shown this year, I think Jay Hill's game plans have been amazing this year, because like if you take that SMU game, BYU is able to game plan to each quarterback. When they had their first quarterback in, the guy who was starting that game, BYU was able to take him out and put so much pressure on him that he wasn't able to operate. And when they switched quarterbacks, BYU switched up their game plan. They allowed him to do some running, but they didn't. It was kind of, again, over the years, BYU, I think BYU fans have gotten used to this whole bend, don't break mentality. And that's really what it is. Bend, don't break, with a lot of these guys, because you can't necessarily bring pressure on everyone. But if you can keep Noah Fafita centered, you don't necessarily, getting some sacks would be good, but you don't necessarily have to sack him. Just keep him pressured. Just keep him contained within the middle. And I think you'll see BYU have a lot of luck. And so, looking out for obviously Fafita, obviously McMillan. Their running back Conley, he's very good. He's got 69 carries for 419 yards on the season. That's an average of 6.1 yards. They've got another guy, Riscano, who's also averaging about 6.4. Their rushing attack's pretty good. But as long as BYU can keep things within just a contained environment, I could see this going very well for BYU. The thing is Arizona did beat Utah, and there were, I think, lessons for BYU to learn from that. And if you watched Texas Tech, they were able to use that to beat them. And now Texas Tech has a much better running back and probably the right kind of protections for that running back in Taj Brooks. But BYU should be able to. I think BYU. If I had to make a bold prediction, I think BYU, you're going to see LJ Martin or Sione Imo. One of the two is going to break for 100 yards. And then you'll have your backup maybe get 40 to 60 yards, and that'll get BYU what they need on offense. Like I said, as long as they can get Arizona to respect the run, then you will see them be able to have good times in the passing game, and they'll be able to attack the secondary for Arizona, and they'll be able to utilize that and be able to get some decent points up on the board. I think if BYU scores more than 24, they can win this game. I think that will allow them to beat Arizona. I think this is a very good looking game for BYU. And if we can win this, we're 6-0, and we don't have to worry about football we don't have to worry about a bowl game. We don't have to worry about being eligible for that anymore. And then the ghost of last season could officially be behind us, and we could see what BYU could do going forward. This next stretch of 3 games for versus Arizona, Oklahoma State, and then going to Central Florida. If we win 2 of the 3, if not all 3. Going into that game against Utah would be huge, because we would still be right there in the conference in the conference title conversation. And so if BYU can take the next few games, which would be wild, it would, that would mean we'd start 8-0. Then BYU could be very well set for the season, but we'll see how things go. I think Saturday is going to be, I think every game to me has felt like a big, like, measuring game to see how BYU is going to do. But I think, honestly, this is one of the best measurements of the season. Because if BYU can beat Arizona, I think you can without too much of a stretch, you could say they'll probably be able to compete with just about anybody in the conference. I think, it'll still be a tough stretch against Oklahoma State, UCF, and Utah. But if they can win this game, I think they can compete with the best of them, and I think that could bode well for them to potentially get to a title game. The conference title game, I should say. I think we need to hold off on playoff implications, because right now I think we just need to focus on trying to win the Big 12 conference, and then a playoff with the expanded playoff that would come just naturally. So we just need to focus on being able to win this game and being able to just take it 1 week at a time. And I think every time I hear a press conference from Kalani, he keeps saying he wants his guys to stay hungry and stay humble. And I think that's a great mentality to have. So ultimately for this week's game, I think, what you'll see, like I said, I think you'll see one of our running backs break for at least 100 yards. That may be too bold to say, and maybe BYU is going to really go with a committee approach and really try to keep fresh legs on the field at all times, and maybe that's how they get 100 yards. But I think they'll ride. I think once somebody gets hot, they will ride the hot hand, and I think that will allow someone to break 100 yards for the game. I think you're going to see, another big game from either Darius Lassiter or Chase Roberts. I think that's another big aspect for BYU is that passing attack. They'll be able to, they have enough guys that you can't just cover one. You can't just say, okay, we'll take Chase Roberts out of the game, because then you're going to have to leave you're going to have to leave either Darius Lassiter or Keelan Marion open. And I think we've even got guys we haven't really used as much yet. JoJo Phillips or Parker Kingston, Tavatease or a Swanson, Reiner Swanson. There are some really good tools in there that you can use to get some good passing attack done, and I think that's going to play well to BYU's advantage this game. And then I kind of went over Conley and Riscano. You're going to have to make sure that you stop that rushing attack. You're going to have to try to contain and try to keep Arizona just to you want to control the way that they're playing. I think ultimately though the BYU will win this game. I think we win this game and we end up 6-0, and the sky's the limit from there. And so we'll see how things go, and I'll be posting the reaction tomorrow. But my final score prediction that I have for this game is 28-20 BYU. The way I kind of see that in my head, if I had to give you like an exact prediction, is BYU will for a good portion of the game. They'll hold them to about 13 points until probably midway through the fourth quarter. And then Arizona's going to score a touchdown, and it'll be 28-20. And then they might have one more drive to try to tie it up, but BYU will be able to hold them off. And I think our defense has shown the ability to do that. But ultimately, that's kind of what's in my head, and that's why I'm going with the 28-20 final score. So that would be Arizona scoring a couple touchdowns and then a couple field goals, and BYU scoring 4 touchdowns. And I think if you can, like I said, if BYU can score more than 24 points, I think you can win the game. And I think you could, that would, this is the national stage. This is the stage to prove yourself. And if they win this weekend, that's going to show a lot of people that they have that they're proving that they are deserving to be in that conversation. But we'll see how things go. And that's all I've got. So thanks for joining me. And like I said, I'll be posting some post-game reaction tomorrow. And thanks, guys. And I'll see you tomorrow.